You touched on Calendered, and I got to ask this for all the listeners, and even for myself. I always like a re-education here. What is the difference between cast and calendared?
That's an excellent question. And there's a bit of a myth built around it, actually. So I want to tell you just a really quick story about my education on the differences between cast and calendared films. And I've always thought of a calendared film as less than. You know, it has typically a lower service life, and it has some limitations in what you can apply it to, and how long it's going to last. So again, and oh, by the way, it's typically a lower cost film as well. So you add all that up and you say, well, it must be a less than film. And I don't know, maybe it was 10 or so years ago, I got a chance to tour a facility that calendars film. So we cast our own film, and we compound and build it right from, powder up to what you buy, and adhesives as well. But when it comes to calendaring film, the equipment is very large and very fast. So you really wouldn't, none of the brands, I don't know, maybe there are some that do, but most of us don't calendar our own film. So I went and got a chance to go through a calendaring mill.
Okay.
And after watching the process, which I'll get into in just a moment, I said to the gentleman that was the CEO of that facility, I said, hey, why in the world don't you guys just, use better ingredients? Because you're making this film way faster than we can. And, if you just use better ingredients in the film, it might cost a bit more. But man, I don't want to tell them he could eat our lunch, but it almost seemed like they could. And he looked at me with this look of disbelief, and he says, we do. Our calendared film, we call it plastisol, and when we cast, we call it organosol. But this plastisol that we make, the ingredients are very similar to what you guys produce as well. And so I was at a loss. Okay, well then why? What's the difference? And here's what the difference is. You can take those same types of ingredients, but when you calendar a film, you start with a very high viscosity. So you have a film a dough-like substance that almost looks like when you squirt insulation out of a can. It froths a bit like that. And that gets applied to two rollers across the top of two rollers that meet. And when those rollers pull together, now you have fused that film. You have made it into a sheet. Although it's bumpy and it's horrible and it's thick and it's not wide enough, but it's started its path on being calendared. And then you take that through another set of rollers and another set of rollers and another set of rollers. And each one of those sets of rollers refines the film to be smoother, wider, and thinner. And then eventually when you get to the end, once you've done it enough, so like for example, if Arlon's we want a 3.2 mil calendared film, then they're going to have to set it through enough rollers to get it down to that thickness. And then we might say we want a satin finish. Okay, so then a couple of those last rollers are going to have a satin finish on them to make an impression on the film. And now you have satin film. Problem is, you've been pulling vinyl through that entire process. And as you pull the vinyl through the process, there's tension in it. So it's not that the vinyl is lower quality in many cases. Sometimes they do, by the way. If we want to make a promotional product that's only good for a year, of course they're going to use monomeric, polymers, and they're gonna definitely use a lower cost ingredient for something that only lasts a year. But some of the films that we're going to talk about today, they're 7-year calendared films, really high quality plastisol, but there's inherent tension in it. So, of course, even 5 years from now, when the sun hits it, it's going to want to shrink a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you have to be careful where you use it. So it's about the process. So then you could ask yourself, why is calendared film cheaper if the ingredients are about the same? Okay, so everything is about time. Time is the commodity that almost all cost is based upon, right? So if you can make something 5 times faster, it's going to cost a lot less to make it. So they're able to calendar film many times faster than we can cast. So there's that process time. Secondly,
Sue,
it
Calendered
doesn't take
seems
much.
amazing. That's on a process. Walk me, if you may, walk me through the cast process now.
Sure. So when you're casting, you're starting with something that's a liquid form, and we call that organosol. Very similar ingredients, except that there are a lot of solvents in it, which help keep all of those ingredients suspended. And we take that, run it under a knife that gives a very, very specific thickness to the still liquid film. But there's a carrier sheet coming along, and that carrier sheet is moving at what we would call a line speed, many times slower than calendared, because as we run it along, we have to go through ovens. And there are many different ovens that have a lot of different zones at different temperatures. And as we flash off different solvents, we're left then with a solid behind. But we have to be clever about how we do it so that everything gets cross-linked and the liquid becomes a solid in the way we want it to. But the beautiful thing is there's no tension in it. It's been carried through the cast process. So even if you had very similar ingredients to start with, one process stretches vinyl through it at a really high speed. Also, keep in mind, calendaring doesn't have a lot of energy cost because we are having to bake off the solvents. So we have high energy cost in the ovens. And you put all of that together, and now you have two films that are excellent films, purposed differently, but a big cost differential in how it's made. So that's why calendared films cost less. It's not because they're less than necessarily. It's just that their process is very different.